Hi, third grade students. It's almost time for the Loma Linda History Tour. I'm Mr. Ship, and I'll be your tour guide when we take our all-day tour around historic Loma Linda. We'll be taking a trip by bus to some of the most important and historic places in our community. So whether you're a student at Bryn Mawr Elementary School or Mission Elementary School, hang on. I'll give you an introduction to the places we'll go on our tour. Here's our first stop, the beautiful Barton Mansion. When Dr. Ben Barton and his wife Eliza settled here in our valley in 1857, this side of the valley was pretty much undeveloped. Dr. Barton bought a lot of land from the Mormon leaders who were headed back to Utah. For a while, the Bartons lived in the Assistencia, which is just behind this house. For a while, the Bartons lived there while this house was being built. Dr. Barton had his medical office in this house, and for a while, Eliza taught school here also. On our tour, I'll tell you about how the oldest house in Redlands almost got demolished. When we started taking our tours around 2000, the house was empty and boarded up. It was owned by the city of Redlands, and they almost demolished it. Thanks to Dr. Terry Vines, a dentist, the house was restored and is available today for offices, and even weddings and other gatherings take place here. Well, here we are at our second stop, the Assistencia, which was a farming outpost of the San Gabriel Mission. Now, you'll be learning more about the California missions in fourth grade, but for now, I'll tell you that the missions were Spain's way of controlling California and its natives with the Roman Catholic religion. These buildings behind me were originally built in 1830 and by 1900 had nearly melted away. Several families lived here before they melted. Some of the Lugo family, some of the Mormon leaders, and Dr. and Mrs. Barton all called this their home after the Mexican government shut down the missions in 1834. Hopefully, we'll be able to go inside the chapel and the courtyard. After the Assistencia was abandoned by Dr. Barton and started to melt, local people decided to restore it. New adobe bricks were made here with mud, and roof tiles were fired in the kiln in the courtyard. They started restoring it in the 1920s, and by 1937 it was completed. I'll tell you some secrets about the Assistencia on our tour. Here we are at the Frink Adobe, probably the oldest home in Loma Linda. It's made out of mud, and in the early days of the pioneers, a lot of people built their homes out of dirt and water mixed together to make mud, and then they used boxes to form those into bricks. Adobe bricks can be very strong, but if they get wet, they can melt, just like the Assistencia did in the early 1900s. The family who built this house in the 1870s were the family of Horace Monroe Frink. The father of that family headed out on the Oregon Trail when he was only 15 years old. He arrived in Utah the next year and went on to California, where he saw the gold rush take place. And then after that, he did a lot of amazing things. He was an Army scout for General Fremont, mapping out the state of California. He hauled gold and silver from mines in Arizona. He helped scout a path for the Southern Pacific Railroad, and he raised cattle in San Mateo Canyon. Finally, he settled here beside the Sanja to build his adobe house and raise oranges. Sadly, he died just as the house was finished in 1874. However, his family lived on, and 5 generations of Frinks grew up in the adobe house. As you can see, the Frink Adobe is in pretty bad shape right now, and its ownership is in transition. We hope it will eventually be turned over to the Two Canyons Conservancy, a group dedicated to preserving historic places, and that it will be restored. We're very fortunate that it is listed as a California Historic Landmark. A lot of amazing things happened here in Heritage Park and right around it. When the first Spanish explorers came to our area in 1776, they found a Native American village here. They called it Wachama, which was their attempt to try to pronounce the name that the Indian people used as the name of their village. Later, a priest from San Gabriel Mission came and named this valley San Bernardino. In 1819, Spanish missionaries and priests started a mission farm here, and native workers dug the Sanja to bring water from the San Bernardino Mountains to this farm area. In 1984, the city of Loma Linda got this land in order to build something called a heritage park. The idea was to create a park that would tell the story of the history of this place. By 2003, we started moving historic homes to the park to save them from being demolished. Now we have the remains of the carriage house and arch from the coal house that once stood here. We have the Curtis Fisk House, the Hugh Howard Cole House, the Eli Curtis House, and the Nat Hinckley House. And there's also a railroad locomotive in the park, and I'll explain on the tour why the locomotive is here. There was a plaque on Mission Road that was stolen a few years ago. It told about the native village, which the Spanish called Wachama. The new plaque is here in Heritage Park and reminds us that there has been life and activity here for thousands of years. You already know that Native Americans were here first, followed by the Spanish in the 1700s. California became part of Mexico briefly after Mexico revolted against Spain, and then it became part of the United States in the 1840s. Among the very first Americans in our valley were pioneers from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also called Mormons. They bought the Lugo Ranch and established the city of San Bernardino in 1851. In 1854, the Van Leuven family arrived, traveling in a wagon train. The father, Frederick, had 10 children. This house is the house of one of the sons, Anson. Anson and his wife Elizabeth first built a simple wooden house, and then something happened that made them build this house. On our tour, I'll tell you more about this house, why it was built the way it was, and why the Van Leuvens were such an important part of our history. By now, you've read about Mound City and the attempts to make a town before the name Loma Linda was given to our area. There were only a few people who bought land in Mound City, and the town failed. One of the few people who lived here before it was Loma Linda was Captain Lewis Smith Davis, who built this house. He called it Snug Harbor. On our tour, I'll tell you why he called it that. Over the years that we have taken our history tour, this house has had a radical transformation. When we started back around 2000, the house was almost falling down. After a lot of work, it's strong and beautiful again and is host to people who come to Loma Linda for medical treatments. Back when Captain Davis had this house built in 1895, he planted all his land with orange trees. He lined his driveway with palms. You can see him standing here. His family is in the carriage. The trees you see beside the road are the same palms that are now so tall along Prospect Avenue. Beside the house is this elevator car. It was salvaged when the old Mound City Villa was torn down. By then, the hotel had become the Loma Linda Health Resort and later the Loma Linda Sanitarium. My wife's grandfather used to operate this elevator when it was still working in the sanitarium. Another piece of the old hotel that was salvaged was this sign from over the front door. It dates back to 1900 when they changed the name from Mound City to Loma Linda. This sign hangs in the Loma Linda University Library. Wherever you go around town, there are reminders of our past, if you know where to look. This is our lunch stop in Elmer Dignio Park. We picked this park for our lunch place for a couple of reasons. First, it's convenient for our bus to park here, and second, From this park, you can see the mound, which was such a big part of our early history. If you stood here 135 years ago, you would see the Mound City train station, the Mound City Villa at the top of the mound, and a long, steep staircase leading up to the hotel. Today, all that remains are the railroad tracks, which are still in use, and the row of trees that line the stairs up the side of the mound. The train station washed away in a flood, the old hotel was demolished in 1967, and the stairs have slowly decayed. There are bathrooms here, a picnic table, and shady places to eat our lunch. Your teacher will give out the lunches and tell you when it's time to pack up so we can finish our tour. For our last stop, we're here at the Romanian Seventh-day Adventist Church. It was not always a church, though. It was first built in 1905 and was known as the Bryn Mawr School. I'll tell you more about why it was built during our tour. For many years, it served as a school for the children of Bryn Mawr, the little town that developed right around the school. Later, it was a Roman Catholic church, then a community clinic, and finally in 2002 was given to the Romanian church. They did a beautiful job of repairing and restoring the old building, and it's their church building now. In the back is the old 1888 mission school building. So for students from Bryn Mawr, part of your school history is in this building, and for mission students, part of your school history is here as well. Beside the Romanian church stands this little building that is open on one side. The families of Bryn Mawr saved their dimes and nickels, and the men of the community built this little building to house a shrine to Our Lady of the Citrus. A statue of the Virgin Mary was inside the shrine, and people believed that she would protect the citrus crops from being frozen. Very cold weather could freeze the oranges and the other citrus fruit and ruin the crops. Today, the shrine is at St. Francis the Worker Catholic Church on Mountain View Avenue. Even though the statue has been moved, the little shrine building still holds meaning for the people of Bryn Mawr who helped to build it. They're very grateful that the old school and the old shrine have been preserved. Well, that's our tour. You'll end the day by going back to your school. You'll get to keep your tour notebook to help you remember our day together. And I hope you enjoy this chance to explore some of the places that still remind us of our community's history.